Assalamualaikum, my name is Saiful Hadi bin Halidan with the code of SO2. I hope all is well on your side. Today, I want to present about my research, which is the impact of home confinement on physical fitness among Sukma Pahang Rugby athletes. We will go through some of the rather important information in my study, which consists of 3 chapters, which the first chapter focus on introduction that will describe some of the background, problem statement, objective and significance of the study. The second chapter will demonstrate understanding some knowledge about the study on the topic that we focus on, which is impact of home confinement to the athletes. And lastly, chapter 3, which demonstrate the methodology used for the research. Alright, next we go to the background of study. In the late of 2019, as informed by World Health Organization, the whole world, including Malaysia, was rocked by a virus attack that has resulted in millions of people dying. WHO has declared this disease as a public health issue that is causing worry around the world, and the biggest concern is potential propagation rate of the virus, which can make matters worse. The disease has prompted Malaysia to take a drastic measure to curb the spread of the epidemic by issuing a movement restriction order, which require people to have home confinement. Based on Safar, self-isolation and quarantine will affect people's normal activity, routine, and livelihood activities, which in turn lead to physical and mental challenges. In general, basically this will reduce the normal movement rate in daily activities, such as buying groceries at the supermarket, eating at restaurants, and even reducing the physical activity at recreational parks. On the other hand, as stated by Tiago Pecanha, a reduction in the amount of physical activity due to the pandemic will certainly have a major impact on the athlete, which related to cardiovascular health, body weight, and a physical fitness for the athlete. This is because, as found by Sarto, logistically constraints and difficulties due to the absence of formal sport facilities can make it difficult to implement specific exercise strategies comparable to those adopted under normal circumstances. This may deteriorate the rate of the performance level among the athletes. As our study focused on rugby players, so almost all the athletes were affected by home confinement. This is also felt for rugby athletes who really need a level fitness and body composition in good condition to ensure they are at their optimal level of performance. Based on Berger, rugby players are exposed to a significant risk of injury, especially when not in the best shape of physical fitness. So, this home confinement period really affected rugby players that may see deterioration in their performance. As conclusion, home confinement period will greatly affect athletes in terms of their physical fitness. Home confinement affected athlete regular progressive overloading, which indirectly will lead to the reversibility, which is one of the principles of training planning, while remaining within the boundaries of their body's ability to load. Alright, next we will look to the research variable. Independent variable is a cause which stands for the characteristic of the experiment that is manipulated or changed by the researcher. So, independent variable for this study is home confinement due to COVID-19, while dependent variable is effect, which is factor that depends on other factors that are measured. The dependent variable for this study is cardiovascular endurance, power, agility, flexibility, and also muscular strength of the rugby players that may affected because home confinement. Next is problem statement. Based on Andreto, he stated that the training routines of a significant number of the athletes around the world have been abruptly interrupted due to the home confinement, which restrict one's movement has caused many less important sectors to be closed. This has disrupted the training and the training plan for the athletes. The statement supported by the Sarto, which found that logistically constraints and difficulties due to the absence of formal sport facilities can make it difficult to implement specific exercise strategies comparable to those adopted under normal circumstances. So, based on the statement of some researchers, here comes some question of whether reduction in training stimuli because of home confinement may deteriorate performance of the athletes. Next, we will focus on research objective. Based on the problem statement that has been identified, my research objective is to measure the effect of home confinement on cardiovascular endurance, muscular strength, flexibility, muscular power, and also agility among Pahang Sukma rugby players. Next is a significance of study. Significance of the study is explaining the importance of the study to several parties. The parties has been identified as the team or organization, the researcher, and especially on the athletes. Firstly, the significance of the study for the organization is to assess the component of physical fitness that must improve for the game demand. With this method, it will give benefit for Pahang rugby team that can form a strong team based on a strong physical fitness foundation by each player. Next is for the researcher. Basically, this study will be beneficial for the future study on the impact of home confinement or the training period on the physical fitness component of the athletes. Lastly, will be very beneficial for the athletes, which can determine the components that need to be improved to achieve the optimal level of the performance among the athletes. By this way, the athlete will acknowledge the physical fitness component that which will give a bad effect on the performance during game day. Next, we will talk about literature review. The world has been shocked by the outbreak of unprecedented pandemic of COVID-19 at the end of 2019, and the first case was detected in China. On early March 2020, World Health Organization has declared the outbreak of coronavirus as a public health issue that is causing worry around the world. And the biggest concern is potential propagation rate of the virus that may affect the countries with a weaker health system. Based on WHO, Malaysia take a drastic measure to curb the spread of the epidemic by issuing a movement restriction order, which require people to have a home confinement. Unfortunately, during present COVID-19 pandemic era, lockdowns and some restrictions have been imposed as a result of public health recommendations and government actions to curb the propagation rate of the virus. There is no doubt that movement restriction can curb the spread of this epidemic, but it greatly affects a person's rate of physical activity as it limits participation in daily normal activities because of closure of recreational areas. As stated by Amar, while this restriction help to reduce infection rate, they also have negative consequences by restricting participation in normal daily activities, physical activities. This situation really encourages people to practice unhealthy lifestyle such as irregular sleep, irregular diet, and also reduction of number in daily physical activity. On the other hand, athletes are also affected by this pandemic and home confinement, when almost all the training session has to be done at home without the observation of the coaches, and all the competition have been postponed or cancelled due to COVID-19. Based on Andreto, the training routines of a significant number of the athletes around the world have been abruptly interrupted. This may affect the performance of the athlete and disrupting some components of physical fitness among the athletes. The situation also impacts on athletes' competitiveness when they return to competition, and obviously due to decreasing in training and diminishing physical performance capacity. This also affect rugby players, which found by Elizabeth that most of rugby players decrease of fitness characteristic and have impact on body composition during off-season. Next, we continue on literature review. Effect of home confinement on the athlete, as we can see, is lack of regular training and competition, lack of effective communication between athletes and the coaches, inability to move freely, lack of adequate sunlight exposure, and inadequate training. Based on Sarto, insufficient and inadequate training may give a big impact that shown physiological factor that may decline associated with it will be amplified. This situation is very worrying for the athletes because in facing home-based training, in the long run, they also have to face some challenges. Besides that, effect of home confinement on athlete performance, which is training reduction or cessation, resulted in anatomical, physiological, and performance modification as a result of training reductions, that known as detraining. This situation is very worrying for the athletes because in facing home-based training in the long run, they also have to face some challenges. This factor may impact on health and skill-related fitness of the athletes. For health-related fitness, the most obvious factor that affected is cardiovascular endurance, which found by term highly trained athletes will reduce their maximum oxygen consumption, which is VO2 max, by 6 to 20% due to long-term cessations. While for the skill-related fitness, Leverett found that the training period result in decrease of power and speed, which supportive the result at a distance. Next, we focus on research design. The research design performed is a non-experimental design, or to be more specifically, is quantitative research design. The quantitative research design used for the study is a comparative study. The reason why this study is using a comparative type of study is because the study will explain the differences between physical fitness among the athlete before and after home confinement. For the sampling size and technique, the sampling size using for the study is around 27. This according to the G-Power software that has been used in determining the sample size that used to calculate statistical power for the study. The technique of sampling used is a purposive technique because the group that has been used is focused on Pahang Sukma rugby athlete. The inclusion factor for the study is player that representing Pahang and player that under 23 only used in the study. And lastly, the exclusion factor is players who is currently injured and having 3-month past injuries will be excluded in this study. For instrumentation, there are a few measurements used to measure the variable in this study. Firstly, PAQ and constant form, which will determine the body condition of the athletes. Next, instrumentation in this study is focused on the variable measure, which is cardiovascular endurance, muscular strength, flexibility, muscular power, and also agility. Next, we focus on the instrument used for the study. Firstly, the method that has been used to measure the cardiovascular endurance is by having a yo-yo test, which usually most of the teams using to assess their athlete fitness level. Besides that, another component of physical fitness that has been assessed, which is power that use vertical jump test. Basically, this test will measure an applicant on lower body strength. Next is flexibility that use sit and reach test that has been considered as one of the linear flexibility tests that determine the hamstrings and lower back extensibility. Subsequently, the agility test that has been used is T-test. This simple test involves multi-directional movement, which is forward, lateral, and also backward. Last but not least is to determine muscular strength among the athlete, which use 1 RM bench press. This test is classified as gold standard for assessing strength and power of the athletes. Next is data collection procedure. Data collection is a systematic process of gathering observation for measurement. First and foremost, for the study data collection procedure is having ethical approved by their coaches or organization to examine the athletes because it will involve the involvement of the athletes under their care. Next, the athlete need to complete a PAQ and a consent form to analyze the athlete's conditions. After that, the pretest data will be using as a secondary data which will be collected from the organizations. Next is a protocol of the test, which is warm up, inform the test to the athletes and make sure the athletes free from the injuries. Next will be continue with the post-test, sorted according to the principle of the training. After that, the data will be analyzed and reported. Lastly, data analysis. For the data analysis in this study, the pair sample t-test will be used for all 5 variables. This is because this test compares the means of the 2 measurements taken from the same individual, object, or related units. As additions, this measurement taken at 2 different times, which is pre and post test. That's all from me. Thank you for your time and very thank you.